So welcome back. It is July. I hope everybody's rental season is starting off well. We'll go through. I'd love to get some feedback as we open things up for questions to see if there's any sort of stories back from homeowners already. What we want to do today, just like before, is go through a couple updates from our end, what we've been hearing, the latest update from Baker that we heard yesterday, and then we'll open it up to questions. In terms of future meetings, we'll recap it again at the end, but I do think we're going to take a pause on these meetings as much as these have been helpful for both homeowners as we hear from you and for us. I think we're going to let the couple summer weeks go by, and we'll collect some information, collect some additional questions, and we'll circle back maybe towards the end of July and hold another one of these meetings. Of course, we're always going to be available for questions in the meantime. So the first thing is just as things get started off, and we already heard, I think it was Barbara who said she felt that you were communicating too much. I think we've been talking about for the last few weeks, all the communications, all the benefits of communicating with your guests. And I think if you were ever to try to decide how much to communicate with your guests, over communicating is a good thing this summer. I think if it's pretty clear that trust is a major factor this year. Trust that you're coming into a home that's been advertised and has addressed the COVID restrictions appropriately, that they feel comfortable coming into their homes. But that trust factor is going to go a long way. If you've done a good job of communicating with them before they come and upon their arrival, and they're trusting you, that relationship is really going to build, and you'll have a good opportunity to turn that into a repeat tenant. I think that's your main goal this year, is to make sure that they trust you, and they're going to want to come back the next year. And I think a lot of you are hearing from you are using those tools, the cleaning guides, the recommendations for vacationing responsibly is a good thing to send out and communicate with your guests. So hopefully you continue to do that, and this year can turn some of your guests into what as Joan, as you were saying, we weren't sure if this would be a fully booked year or not, but many of you are getting fully booked. So hopefully we can turn that into a lot of repeat renters. In terms of, Joan, do you want to give an update? We did get an update yesterday from Baker about the quarantine rule that Massachusetts has. Do you want to explain what that means for anybody that has seen that or hasn't seen that?
Sure. I think most of you know by now that Governor Baker announced that we no longer need to inform any guests from anywhere in New England or New York or New Jersey that they need or urge them to quarantine, self-quarantine for 14 days when they arrive. It's never been a requirement. He even said in answer to a question yesterday that to require it, to mandate it, would be getting into constitutional rights, so they really can't do that. But I think they're justifiably getting a little anxious about some of the states that they see, mostly in the South and the West, that are where the virus is surging. It's not in the Northeast, so he's lifted that requirement to announce to them that they should do that or should consider doing that, but it is not required. He used a stronger word this time, and that was instructed. But again, it's still not a requirement, and I think that as long as you tell any of your guests who are coming from states other than the ones that are now exempt from that about this urging, encouraging, whatever word you like to use, you're okay. There will be thousands of vacationers from other states who are coming to the Cape and Islands, many for just a week, and they will not be staying at the home and self-quarantining. But as we've said all along, the important piece here is that you should urge them and tell them that a mask is required, social distancing is required, 14 feet on the beach from the next beach blanket or chairs, whatever, spread out. And even on Nantucket, I noticed on Facebook, they are now saying you must wear a mask even on the bike paths. So people are being very cautious, and I think that's a good thing. You know, wearing a mask is a small price to pay. So it just pays to be cautious.
Yeah, and I think Baker said that the quarantine rule that was in place, the urging, even though it wasn't a requirement, the urging, the fact that that was out there has done its job to limit the number of people coming from farther away places. And so the rule is in place. It's doing its job at the moment. And thankfully, we have many of our guests are coming from the New England, New York, New Jersey area. In terms of we've received feedback both from folks that live on the Cape, our own team members that are living on the Cape, and from just following various Facebook groups, seeing that we're pleased to see that majority of vacationers that are going to the beaches, going to the restaurants, are vacationing responsibly. They are following these guidelines, wearing masks, keeping their distance. You know, there may be, you know, you can't enforce everybody, but I think if the vast majority of people are following these rules, it's going to allow for vacationers to have an enjoyable stay. So far, we've heard that the beaches haven't been overcrowded, and so distancing on the beaches haven't been an issue. So hopefully that continues. It is just at the beginning of the summer here, so hopefully that would continue. Joan, what are you hearing from homeowners that have guests already? Anything to report back to the group?
Well, hearing that things are going well so far, and they're appreciative of all of your attention to them with notices and guidance. We're getting a lot of guest reviews. They're starting to flow in, and quite a few of them mention, you know, how appreciative they were of they say it was COVID ready. So, you know, that's a really good thing. They really appreciate that, and that is key this year. One thing I wanted to mention is that take advantage of these inquiries that you're getting to send some information. You don't need to deluge a vacationer with info, but if your home is booked and you get an inquiry, just use it as a marketing tool for next year, because next year it may be a whole different ball game, and we may not have this flood of inquiries like we do this year. Sometimes we get, by mistake, a response from a vacationer or from a homeowner thinking that they're emailing the vacationer. And just this morning I saw an email from a homeowner who said to the vacationer, nope, booked, check next year. And that was it. And it just, you know, I thought, wow, what a lost opportunity. You could just give a couple of sentences. I just booked it, but we'd love to have you next year and just a couple of sentences just to ingratiate yourselves with them, because otherwise they'll forget about you, really. So take it as an opportunity.
The other thing that I would mention regarding that, even though it's probably so far out of so many people's minds, is next summer, is 2021. But we talked about this last year in that we've been seeing an increase in activity during the summer. As you go through the summer, especially as you get into August, people are going to be looking for the next summer. When people are down there this summer, they're going to be already thinking about next summer. So I know there are many reasons why homeowners do and don't want to post their pricing for summer 2021, but if you're able to do so, you are going to get a few extra eyeballs, even starting this summer, for vacationers looking for next year. And I think it's very apparent there are a lot of vacationers looking now. And I mentioned right before we started the call that availability for July weeks is down to about 10%. 10% of the homes are available right now in July. So there's not much available. So a lot of vacationers that are looking for a last minute booking they're going to feel like they've missed out, and they missed out on a rental, and it's giving them a reason to look for next year already. So I would expect, we'll report on that later on in the summer, what sort of activity we're seeing for summer 2021, but that's something to yet add to your list of things to think about. So we'll see what happens. So, Joan, anything else?
And please be sure to update your calendars. We're still seeing calendars that have not been updated, and it's upsetting to vacationers. Sometimes they contact us and they're annoyed, and I've emailed 6 different people, and their calendars are showing availability, and yet when I contact them, they say no. So it's really important to keep your calendars up to date.
Yeah. Well, I think just to reiterate that point, Joan, we saw a comment, vacationers email us, and just out of frustration, I saw one vacationer contact 5 people only to get no's. 5 people for 5 available homes based on the calendar, but they were all booked. I think the frustration is going to lead to, and they bluntly said, we're not going to use your site, or we question about using your site. So it goes not just against the individual homeowner, but that it reflects poorly on the We Need a Vacation platform, and it's not an easy way to keep our customers happy. So yes, I agree with you, Joan, on keeping calendars as up to date as possible. So Joan, I do have, just before we open it up, I do have a question here from Don that we'll take. Don was asking about the unfortunate situation if someone was to come up with the virus while at the house. What are the guidelines? What are the rules for dealing with that?
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons we encourage that you have a list of all guests, so that it would make contact tracing easier. They would, of course, have to leave right away, and you would have to have someone come in, preferably experts in disinfecting. I mean, truly disinfecting. Maybe the people with the hazmat suits, and there are companies like that will do it, and then leave the house empty for a couple of days. Also contact the next renters, tell them about it, and unfortunately offer to give their money back if they decide not to take that risk. They may be a high risk family with older people in the party, or compromised in other ways. So it would be tough, and I hope it doesn't happen, but we would owe it to the next renters to make sure they knew, and to make the decision on their own what to do.
Okay, thanks. Anything else, John, before we open up to questions?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, we have Tina lined up already. I've seen your hand's been up for a while, so let's let you ask a question. Hopefully you meant to raise your hand.
I did,
Tina?
yeah.
Good.
So this is my first year actually renting. Last year I just had some friends rent just to kind of play around with it. So I've really, really, really been relying on you guys and following everything you've said. And I have to say, I've had 3 weeks of renters in, and I've gotten 3 fabulous relationships, not just reviews, but people who have emailed me and said, among the first things is they appreciated all of the communication. So like every time you guys say, tell your guests this, I tell my guests that, and they like it. But the other surprise was that when I was preparing my COVID-ready home and taking out all the really cute things I had lined up, oh, so cute on the tables and all that stuff, when I got done, I realized I liked the way it looked a lot better. I had dealt with some safety things. It never occurred to me that scatter rugs on the floor were not only a fabric that could absorb germs, but a safety issue. Much easier to clean without all this cute stuff that's usually pretty complicated looking. and it just looks so much nicer. So that was a nice surprise for me.
Yeah.
And I think I had one more thing, but I can't remember. I just know that everything you said, I've just been like doing it to the max, and it's not overkill. People really like it. It's worth doing.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Tina. I think there's a fine line there between making a home look too austere and kind of void of everything.
Yeah, that's what I was
A
afraid
little
of.
too hotel-like, but the opposite extreme is when it's just too busy and too cluttered, almost too lived in. You know, we've often gotten comments from people saying, you know, it just seemed like the owners just lived there and they just picked up and left. They took their suitcase with them and that was that. And I would err on the side of making it simpler and more basic. And it really does look nice. Sometimes I've given some advice to people who say, you know, I'm just not getting the bookings, and I see that they've had a lot of heavy looking, you know, oriental rugs on the floor, or you know, just looks wintry or kind of ponderous, you know, and just lightening it up is just, and removing rugs like you did and exposing the floors, wood flooring perhaps, or it just seems to make it more appealing for a summer rental rather than a year-round, you know, rental home.
I did remember my other question. We have, I think, all over East End, a lot of koi dogs. And I'm wondering, I had a call today from a neighbor who saw a pup approaching the deck to my house. So I called my guest and told her, and she said they hadn't seen it, they hadn't gone out, they'd be aware, and we chatted. But I'm wondering, are you telling people anything ahead of time about coyotes and how to not approach them? Or do you just let it happen?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure we've ever gotten that before.
I think my house is kind of on their route because they, right one day, they kind of walk through the yards and go across the street, and that's about it. But this was a puppy.
Coyotes are not very common, I don't think, in many areas of the Cape. So, you know, unless you're in an area where they are common. I mean, if you have little kids in the parties, or you or they have pets, I don't know if you allow pets.
Nope.
You know, it might behoove you to tell them.
Okay.
Yeah, just as you would say to somebody, you know, well, there's poison ivy in the yard, or you know, anything like that. You just want your guests to know that and just be aware of it. Yeah.
All right.
We have a lot of snakes. We have a lot of skunks.
Oh, there's Beta.
You.
Thanks, Tina.
Yeah, thank you.
Joan, another question here from Julie about the number of people. Is there a limit on the number of people that can gather at a home? Or I assume at a home, or?
Yeah, there haven't been any limits on the number of people. If you have a home that has 6 bedrooms and you accommodate 12 people, you can have 12 people. These, you know, it's your responsibility, or the tenant's responsibility. You know, if they're 2 families coming together, it's, you know, their decision to do that. It's just out in the public. So those 12 people, that might be a little difficult if they, you know, were out. Good luck finding a restaurant that could accommodate 12 people these days. But that might be a little harder because they do say, you know, no more than 10 people. So it's kind of, there's no hard and fast rule, I don't think. But in the house itself, I think there's no strict rule about the number of people.
Okay, that sounds good. And I just double checked the beach guidelines. The Mass beach guidelines also mention no groups of over 10. So that's you can gather at a home, but not not over 10, I think just in general public and on the beach. All right, next up, Doug, you made it back.
Is he still in his
Are you still-
workshop?
Would you repeat that, Joan?
Yes,
Yep,
you are.
there you are. I
Oh,
think
no.
I'm convinced you live in your workshop.
I know I am. And I know that many people on these calls remember me always saying something. But I got that from my father. My father used to go into grocery stores when I was a kid. When I would go with him, and he talked to everybody. And I said, "Dad, you're embarrassing me. You're embarrassing me." At any rate, the last time we were talking about, I had asked the question about the deaths in Cape Cod. And I'm hoping I'm going to give some information that to all of us will be much more calming and encouraging and protecting for ourselves. I know most of us here are older on the call, so we are obviously, as long as our immune systems are good, but this is the math. Anybody want to double check me on the math, please do. 140 died. This is last week, okay? So probably changed a little bit. Last Wednesday. And I double checked that because one of the wonderful people had actually looked it up. Now, 140. Population of Cape Cod is 115,888. You take 115,888 and divide it into 140, which gives you the math, which is the possibility of dying, which is 0.00065. Now, that would be just a little over 0.5% chance of dying in 100,000. Plus, Joan, you said before, most of the passings are occurring in nursing homes. So only reason I do the population is because we're keeping kids out of school. So we're considering them part of the problem, part of the people who would be affected. Anyway, I hope it's encouraging because it's a lot, that kind of ratio is like probably less than lightning, been hit by lightning, right? So that's all I'll say. I'm gone.
All right. Thanks, Doug. Yeah, definitely Massachusetts, the New England states are seeing encouraging signs. Those stats help to show encouraging signs for Cape Cod. There certainly are, we've talked with, again, we have many of you homeowners live on the Cape or Islands. We have our We Need a Vacation team members that are on the Cape. So there's still that concern over just the population that every summer grows to, doubles in size. So I think while we're at a good point, it's bringing a lot of people from outside into the area, and that's going to be the question. And I think that's why we always look at the positive signs also of people adhering to the guidelines. You're wearing your mask, you're keeping your distance, and that will be the best protection against any sort of population increase. Is if everyone's following these guidelines, then I think we can ensure that the numbers stay the way they are. They're heading in the right direction. So
Yeah, good point, Jim. Thank you for bringing that up. Excellent.
All right, thanks, Doug. All right, any other questions? If I didn't mention this before, if you haven't been on the call before, you can raise your hand by going to the participants list. If you find the participants list at the bottom, I believe then the raise hand button is within your list of participants. Let me find the actual text, but here we go. We got benchmarks as a bring you in. I'm not sure your name.
It's Tom Scanlon.
Hey, Tom.
Hi, Tom.
Here's a question. Hi, Joan. Hi, Jim. How much good would it do with a bed cover if you just put it in the dryer for a half hour and applied heat to it rather than actually washing it?
I would think that would take care of it. Probably it's better than not doing it at all. And the heat does destroy virus. So it would have to be very high heat. I know, some people are laundering them in between, but that's a huge job and that takes a long time. Others have duplicates and are just putting a duplicate on, but I would think that putting it in the dryer and at a very high heat would be a good thing to do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. John, you're up next. Hello, John.
Yeah, hi, how are
There you
you?
are. Good, how are you?
Good, good. Just three little tips and a question. But first of all, I'd like to just say thank you, Joan, for all you've done. It's been really great and very timely. And I don't know, Jim, if you're doing the metrics for the promotion or whatever, but boy, just got inundated with requests, earlier last month, and it was just wonderful to see. And I think it's really going to take root and really push We Need a Vacation to another level. So, just thank you for all you're doing and all the, attention to detail and quite frankly, caring, about all of us. So,
Thanks, John. It's a real team effort, as we say around here.
It is. And I hope you guys bury home away. Or not. VRBO is their only call, apparently. They're always changing something. So
Yeah.
That's the latest. But a couple tips of one thing we did, and I think it kind of sets a little precedent. We have a keyless entry in the door, and I put one of those hand sanitizers, the automated ones with gel, right there. So the moment someone comes up to the door, there it is, which I think just sends a message like we care, stay safe. It just kind of, again, sets the tone. It was kind of difficult to get. It took us maybe about a week or so. I found one on eBay there. A lot of them are very similar, but about $70 for an automated one, touchless. And we found that the gel works a lot better than the liquid. You always have a choice, and they can take either. But the liquid is it's like water, so it spills all over the place, and the gel has more of a consistency, so it's much easier to work with. So that's one thing.
Great idea.
Yeah. Another tip that we implemented a couple of years ago as a suggestion, somebody we use for pest control, and he sprays our yard for ticks and mosquitoes and things like that. And he strongly urged us at that time, we were having our clean crew come with their own vacuum cleaner, and someone had asked about this a couple weeks ago. And his suggestion was that we would buy our own, and we would instruct our cleaning crew to use ours, which is a very good one. I actually asked a cleaning crew that a lot of them use these German. They're called Miele, I think, or something like that.
Miele, yeah.
Yeah, very, very good. They're about $300, and you can get them right there in Orleans at the vacuum store.
Right.
So, we just found, that God forbid if there was ever a bed bug issue, but even coming now into the virus, I don't, if that would all be able to be spread by a vacuum cleaner, but it's just one less thing to kind of keep the home a little more secure. So that's my other point. The third point, someone mentioned about coyotes. We're in South Chatham, and we do have a coyote issue, and we actually hear them at night howling.
Oh, wow.
So in the instructional letter we have for people about the trash, I include that there is a coyote population there. So if you put out a bag of trash, please enclose it in the canister, because for sure there's going to be trash ripped all over the place if you just put a plastic bag out there. So that's the other little, the way I deal with that. Not all areas probably have that issue, but we certainly do in our neck of the Cape. So, and my question, Joan, you mentioned if someone became ill that they would have to go home. How is that dealt with? Like if they're sick, first of all, so now you're telling them get out. How is that? And where would they go? Would they go home?
Well, first of all, they would probably want to leave and go home and go to their medical facility where they live. If they're that sick and they can't, which is highly unlikely. I mean, I just don't think you come and you feel fine and then the next minute you don't, although I suppose it's possible. But to go downhill that quickly, but they should, go to the hospital if they, if they can't even make it home. But they can't stay at your home and convalesce. I mean, that just is not, that's just out of the question.
And is that recommended? I mean, where does that thought come from? Is that something that the governor is suggesting? If
I haven't seen anything about that.
yeah,
I don't know if anyone else has.
That's the issue. I mean, if you get a call from Canada, hey, we just came down with COVID. Well, okay, pack your bags.
Yeah.
Sorry, bye-bye.
Yeah.
Give them the bum's rush. I mean, it's kind of, you want to be a little tactical about it, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, you express your empathy, of course, but it could take weeks for them to get better, and they just can't stay at your house to, there's an end to their lease, and it's usually in 7 days, or less. So, they legally they can't stay beyond their date of their departure. I
just didn't know, is there anything to back, telling them that you're going to need to leave is what kind of backs that up? But they say, well, I don't want to go anywhere. I can't get out of bed, that kind of a thing. If you get that kind of feedback, where do you go with that?
Yeah.
I think some homeowners may have added things, some language to their leases or an addendum if they sent one, speaking to that possibility.
Actually, your lease, I implemented that as well. My lease, in comparing it to what you guys offered, was, we left ourselves vulnerable in a few areas. So that was very helpful as well.
Yeah. Good.
Okay. Thank you.
Hopefully it won't happen to any of us, John.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
No, it will.
Yeah, agree. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but I think the odds that somebody would want to just get home is probably the most likely scenario. I don't think even their family members or guests are going to want to continue their vacation if they know somebody else has the virus. So
bye, Dad. We're going out to dinner.
We'll knock on wood that it doesn't happen to any one of us or anybody really.
The other issue is that the Cape and Islands hospitals really aren't equipped. They don't have the number of beds. So if that happened to one of my guests, the first thing I'd say is, yes, we have a hospital here on the island, but if I were you, I would get back and be in your own environment, not only for my homes, my future guests and all that, but for their sake, absolutely.
Sure. Yep.
That's a good point.
All right. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
So good points there as well. I do like the keyless entry and the additional sanitizer. I mean, I know the sounds of the sanitizer on the wall, like it makes you feel like more of a business or a hotel like, but I mean, in this day and age, like it's a nice little thing to do for your guests, and again, show that you care. So there are no more hands raised here. Feel free to chime in.
Lorraine Shepley has her hand up, but not
in that variety. Lorraine, I can find you. Unmute Lorraine here.
Unmute.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. I had a few quick questions. Pray to God, first of all, none of us get struck by lightning, but if you get struck by lightning, at least you don't spread it, right?
Exactly.
That's true.
And as far as they try never stay in one place for too long. They do roam. I have Coyotes that live on a golf course, and they come and go with, and I howling. They were here for a while, and I haven't seen them because I have too many rabbits. But anyway, question. Beaches. People saying, would I give them a refund? Beaches are closed. Do you have that? Do you have an answer for that? What you should say to them? Because there's other things to do besides go to the beach, but we are surrounded by them. So
you were breaking out. Sorry, your connection was breaking up a little bit. But were you saying if the beaches were closed, or they ended up closing the beaches?
Yeah, they're saying, would we get our money back?
Yeah.
And
I think, Joan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think while that's outside of your control, you have to just keep it in mind of the guest experience. You're not required to. You're not required, and I think if the beaches were to close, I think there's a bigger issue going on with just that.
Right.
You know, they're going to close the issue, and we're facing other, you know, influx of the virus. So I think some sort of gesture would be appropriate in any scenario like that, even though it's outside of your control. But providing a refund, you don't necessarily need to provide a partial refund. It's because I just don't see them.
right.
I don't see that. Joan, do you have?
I don't think that they would say, okay, we're going home, we want all our money back. If they did, then that's a separate issue and you'd have to deal with it, pro rate or something. But I think in general, if the beaches are closed and there are other things for them to do, I mean, I would probably be tempted to compensate them in some way, you know, a dinner somewhere or something, just, you know, to make up for the fact that that they can't go to the beaches. But I would think they'd always be able to find a beach somewhere. I just don't think it's very likely either.
Yeah, I think exactly. I think since it is a what if scenario, I think the more likely scenario that people are facing with today is that there are limitations on the beaches. So, you know, if you're at Coast Guard Beach, there's no tram service. There's limited parking at some of these other places. And so I haven't heard yet, but if parking becomes difficult for some people to park at the nearest beach, then that's kind of a drawback from their experience. But at the same time, vacationers know that they're going into this where there are restrictions in place. So for that reason, if it's just due to a restriction on a beach where it's crowded or you need to get there by 8 a.m. instead of 10 a.m. in order to get your parking spot, I think vacationers know that. Or if they don't, you can, you know, that's a good tip to give them. And then therefore they're not going to be upset that they didn't, they're caught by surprise.
Okay. And I heard feet, they had to be, you mentioned 14, give or take, apart on the beach.
Joan mentioned 14, it's 12 feet, yes.
Okay. Okay. And then pillows, I'm having people bring their own pillows because I think it's a COVID thing too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one other thing that I just wanted to mention.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
Thank
Right.
you. You're doing a good
Thanks,
job.
thanks, Lorraine.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mentioned the previous week that we have a rental that we're renting this summer, and the host has said they've taken away their blankets, taken away their pillows. We're gladly bringing them, and it's no big deal. Just save a little extra space in the car for a couple of extra pillows, and you know it doesn't even faze us. So and knowing that it's a safer thing to do. All right, any other hands here, virtually or because I can't see all your faces in the squares. Happy to take some additional questions here.
Jim, one thing that comes up every summer is that vacationers are inconvenienced in some way or another. Last summer there was the tornado, but there's always something, a dishwasher breaks or, you know, some appliance that they can't use. And homeowners often say, what should I do? And really, you want to make them feel heard and that, you know, you want to acknowledge the inconvenience. And, you know, I always think that a meal out or a gift card to a specialty, you know, food store or, you know, some place close to your home is a nice gesture, and they really appreciate it. And it usually ends up being, you know, an appreciative vacationer who perhaps wants to return to your home and is and writes a positive review. But to do nothing and just say, I'm sorry, you know, we'll do the best we can to fix it. And another thing is air conditioning. That's usually a problem with some people during the summer, but just a kind gesture just goes a long way. Beta,
Jim,
don't
can
you agree?
I definitely agree. Can I piggyback on something that Lorraine brought up about the beaches possibly closing? You know, I feel, and Joan suggested, and it's a great suggestion, and she just mentioned it again, if our houses can be perfect right up to the day the tenants come, and then something inevitably, at least for my older home, breaks, and absolutely be as responsive and give them gifts, certificates, whatever we can do. The closing of the beaches, I don't know, I have a little harder time with that because that's out of my control. I didn't close the beaches. I can't guarantee that the beach. So what I'm getting at is, as Jim says, it is all about the guest experience. So even though that was out of my control, I can hear Jim's voice saying, yeah, but you know, we even if things aren't in our control, all we care about our guests' experience. So I think what I'm saying is perhaps it all comes back to, once again, communication before they come. And we have been really trying to get this point across to all of our homeowners, how important it is for your guests not to arrive this year and think that it's going to be business as usual. Now, whether that's a beach closing or long lines at restaurants, whatever it might be, I think they're going to be a little more able to roll with things like a beach closing that may happen once after they arrive, if we've sort of prepared them a little bit. So I think many of you probably have reached out to your guests, but if you haven't, we can't stress the importance of that enough. Just to manage their expectations, make them welcome, but to come understanding that they need to vacation responsibly and patiently.
No. Yep, good advice. Another thing that I was just thinking about is, you know, if beaches, the parking is restricted and people have a problem with that and they complain to you, I would find something else that they might be able to do. For instance, I think I would say, okay, I will pay for you to rent bikes and go on the bike trail for, you know, for the afternoon or something. Or in our neighborhood, we have a cruise, the Blue Claw cruise boat that it's just a tiny boat that, you know, would just accommodate the captain of the ship and the, you know, your family. And it goes down Pleasant Bay to Chatham to see the seals. And, you know, I would offer to, you know, to fund that for them perhaps, or something along those lines that would say, okay, you know, maybe you can't go to the beach on this day because you missed the opportunity and you couldn't park, but, you know, here's an idea for something else that you can do that might be fun and doesn't entail going to the beach. I don't know, is that too generous?
It's generous, but you could also recommend some good hiking trails too. So no, I mean, I joke. I mean, those are, you know, just providing guidance on things to do. Yes, it isn't all of it. People come for the beaches, but they're also looking for other things to do. So the gesture, Beta and Joan's points definitely are very true, and it's all about the guest experience. And it's also about the communication up front and what we've constantly been talking about. All of you on these calls have been very responsible, and you would have seen yesterday our video that we sent out. We compiled a video titled Vacationing Responsibly on the Cape and Islands. And so if you didn't see it yesterday, check your emails for that video. It's about a 4-minute long video, but just talks about setting expectations of what it's going to be like at on the Cape and Islands, at the beaches, when you're dining out, things to do. It's a nice video to share with your guests, and again, go along with any other information and any of your other words that you want to tell your guests up front. A couple hands have come back up, so I'm going to go back to Doug. You're back on, Doug.
Unmute. Yes, hello. So, different subject.
Sure.
We're talking about things that go wrong, right? So, a couple of years ago, on 4th of July, I get a call from the guests there that they can't flush the toilets. And the water is not going down in the sink. And I'm going, great, it's 4th of July. So I asked him to do a few things and but nothing happened. So I called my regular plumber, no answer. I called Roto-Rooter, which I don't like using because they're very expensive and they most of the time don't know what they're doing. And then I made an appointment with them. Then I said, wait a minute, do some research. I found a company, which if anybody wants to know, is called Cape Cod Enterprises. They came at 10:30 in the evening for an emergency visit to try to figure out what can go on 4th of July. I was like, thank you so much. And they came and they couldn't get it to work. The next morning at 8 a.m., they sent another crew with different equipment and started to work on this the entire day. It ended up that all the pipes coming from the house, which is 2 main pipes going to 2 different septics and a leach field, were completely jammed. And they cleaned them out temporarily. Now, the thing is I said to the guests, because they were like flipping.
Of course.
I'm so sorry about this. I will refund your entire stay.
Wow.
And they were like, really?
That's generous.
Well, I got an email the next day from the wife, and she said, Doug, you've been so wonderful trying to make this work. Let's just refund the proportion of the days we didn't have a toilet, right? So then the following several months after that, the company came back, ripped out our complete lawn. Thank goodness the septic tanks weren't the problem themselves, but all the pipes. And they were very reasonable. So if anybody wants any help with something like that, I recommend Cape Cod Enterprises. They're fantastic. I don't know if they're advertising with you or not. That's all I have to say.
Good.
We'll look them up. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, all these, issues happen. As you mentioned, things go wrong. We try to avoid them. As Beta said, think your house is perfect and then something can go wrong, but the way you handle it, the way you manage it, you could turn it at the way Doug handled that. It was going to, at the worst, just avoid a negative review because he handled it well. And at the best, you hear stories where these people end up coming back and deciding to come back, even though they had, this major issue happened. They say, no, we had a good time despite that, and we enjoyed the home and understand it's a one-time thing. We're coming back. So it's all a matter of how you handle it. Let me go back to Tom. Oh, yeah. A few more minutes left. Tom, you're back on.
Just a question. I know we need to do the log. My question is it a requirement? And is it possible to allow the tenants themselves to keep the log, or do we have to keep it? In other words, have them keep track of everybody that was in the house, but hold on to it in case it's needed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. I think you don't want to leave, for privacy reasons, you don't want to leave it there at the house.
Right.
I think, some homeowners like to get every guest's name in the party up front. You don't have to necessarily do that. I think what you're looking for is if you had any guests that came, you just want to, we talked about this the other week, it'd be sufficient to ask them for their names. And I wouldn't rely on them to write it down and leave it there in the house. I mean, you'll never get the names that way.
All right, but just the guests. And what if they have a dinner party? I mean, are you supposed to get those names as well?
They should tell you if they do, and they have guests that are not staying over but come to your house. They should be responsible, and you should tell them to provide those names too. Just for a security, and again the potential for having to do contact tracing.
Okay, thank you.
Shouldn't be too many people having dinner parties.
Yeah, less likely this year.
Right.
All right, thanks, Tom. All right, so let's see. I lost Joan here on as the.
You lost
Okay.
me?
Nope, you're there. I think you got taken off as a host of the meeting, but that's okay.
Like, how could you lose your mother? No answer?
No, no answer. In fact, I was actually there at the We Need a Vacation office, or your home today for the first time. So
Right, with our 2 little grandchildren.
so another positive sign that things are, at least here in the Northeast, are headed in the right direction. Any other questions from the audience here? Well, we got a couple minutes left. Feel
Anything
free
from
to
the
pass them along.
peanut gallery?
I will say that I know we mentioned it, and people have observed the inquiries. I'm running through some of the numbers and just amazed by the traffic that we've received. And I think we expected there to be a flurry of activity. And I think ever since May 18th, when phase 1 was announced, we've just seen real record activity on the site. And it only increased in June, June 8th, and on June 8th. And traditionally, January and July are the biggest months. So if you don't have July, if you have July and August availability still, July is the biggest month for these traditionally. And so, I think there's no signs of slowing down at the moment. I do expect the traffic and the interest to continue as people are looking for ways to fill out their summers. So the opportunity is there. If you need help, certainly reach out to us. There are the last minute alert offers, but there's other ways to help promote your home and get your final weeks booked.
Yeah, and I would say if you've never used purchased an alert before, they really work very well. And especially, I would think they would work well this summer because there's so little available. And the page that your listing appears on for the alerts gets a great deal of exposure. So it's worth $30 or so to buy an alert for a given week if you still have it available.
Yeah. And
Jim,
yeah, Beta.
I just wanted to add, and maybe I can pose this as a question to you two or to Joan. What do you guys think is going to happen this fall in terms of bookings? I know I have my theory, but what is yours?
I think it might be stronger than usual, because especially if people are still working a lot more from home than ever. But I think a lot depends on what happens with the schools. If the schools go back in late August, early September, you'll lose those families because they'll, their kids haven't been in school for a while, so they're not going to be missing school. But, on the other hand, it may be a kind of situation, especially in Massachusetts, where so many people are so close to the Cape, that kids are in school in alternate weeks. So one week they might be in school, and then the next week they might be learning from home or learning from their vacation home. So, is that your theory too, Beta?
Absolutely. I don't know. We'll see, but I'm anticipating a very strong fall. I know personally of colleges and universities that have already stated that either they're not opening at all or for students, or they're doing, as you mentioned, some kind of a flex plan. I just think there are so many otherwise people who just aren't going to be working, and that's what's keeping them from their from being able to get away in September. So we all know how beautiful it is here then, but most of us have commitments during that, normally have commitments then. I think that's going to be very different this year. So if anybody isn't making their home available in the fall because they don't think it's going to get filled, I think again, maybe they won't, but if you price it right, I have a feeling there's going to be a tremendous amount of demand for this fall, at least September.
Right. No, I would think it would continue through the fall, given that some people may be hesitant to travel to the Cape this summer just because of the just increase in population, but we know the summer is less the fall is less crowded. It's an opportunity for a lot of people to get away, whether it's a long weekend, a week, and again, depending on the work from home situation for many folks, the opportunity to just work from home or work from the Cape or from the island. So I definitely think we'll see an uptick of that as well.
So we should all be prepared for that, is my point.
Mhm.
Get your calendars ready for that.
Agree. All right, anything else, Joan, Beta, to add? Okay, I think we will wrap up today's session.
Happy
Thank you
4th
again.
of July to everybody.
Yes, happy 4th of July and happy start of the summer months. We will be back at it. We're not going to be back at it next week. We're gonna, again, like I said, we're going to take a couple weeks off here. Not sure what day we're going to come back, but we'll take a look at the schedule and see what works. Feel free to send along to us any suggestions if you have any for other ways to run these meetings. I do think they've been working well for all of us. So we'll do it again. In the meantime, stay safe. We'll talk with you again soon.
Thanks for coming virtually.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.